Hello and welcome back to my channel, and more importantly, welcome to this week's Franchise Friday video. The franchise we're going to be taking a look at this week, if you have not been able to tell from my sweater, is Nightmare on Elm Street. So if you're unfamiliar with my Franchise Friday videos, pretty much what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my makeup like a character, in this case Freddy Krueger, but I'm going to glam it a little bit, just a little bit, and I'm going to talk about each of the movies in the franchise, at least in the sort of original run that I have the box set for, and give you my opinions and my thoughts. So not a whole lot that I say is like, concrete. A lot of it is my opinion based on what I think of the movies, but they will be absolutely littered with spoilers. So if you have not seen these movies, all of them came out at least 25 years ago, I think, or 20 years ago at least. With the more recent one being Freddy vs. Jason. I think they tried to reboot the series in like 2010, and from what I've heard, it was a fail, and I haven't even seen it. So the last one in my box set is Freddy vs. Jason, so that's where we're going to end. If you're worried about spoilers, this is going to be a very, very spoilery video, so just keep that in mind. So I'm going to start with some glam makeup. I'm going to do my eye makeup first, and then we'll move on into some other stuff. I obviously already have my eyebrows done, so what we're going to do now is prime my eyelids areas, and then we're going to make a nice dark smoky eye. So I remember a Nightmare on Elm Street movie coming out when I was really young, and all I had to hear was that 1, 2, Freddy's come for you, as like a trailer that they were showing on TV, and that was it. I would have nightmares. And something that I think I forgot to mention in my last Franchise Friday video last week, which is just as important in the Friday the 13th series as it is in Nightmare on Elm Street, is how much I love a good horror movie sort of musical motif. I don't think modern horror movies do that as well as the horror movies from like the 80s do, and it's kind of sad because I really think that they're extremely effective in creating that sort of fear in a character. The little girl's dressed in all white in the Nightmare on Elm Street movie, they're doing that skipping rope thing and they're singing the song. Like, that's all it takes, and that image is evoked. All I have to do is hear a melody that's sort of similar to that, and I'm instantly thinking of Freddy. And in the Friday the 13th series, all you have to hear is that and you're like, Jason's around. Even if you haven't seen him, even if you have not seen a whisper of him being around, he's there because you're hearing that music. And I really think that, it's unfortunate because they could have really done something interesting in that sense with sort of more recent horror movie creations like Annabelle, let's say, and I think it's sad that the sort of modern horror movies have sort of missed that mark. I don't even think, as much as I love the It movies, I don't think they had like a musical thing for Pennywise either, and that's just like one of my favorite film techniques. I mean, even look at Jaws. The shark in Jaws has got to be one of the most, important horror movie villains, I guess you could say, in, modern film history. And all I have to do is go, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Man, the art of a good little musical thing like that. I love that so much. And I think the musical, motif for Freddy, partnered with what a phenomenal filmmaker Wes Craven was, is really what makes the Freddy movie so impactful, especially the first one. The first one is one of the few in the Freddy series that I think I could find myself actually being afraid of if I was a little bit younger. For the most part, I don't find them scary. Now, it's probably just because I didn't grow up in the 80s. If I had grown up in the 80s, maybe I would be afraid of them. But because I had a sort of different style of movie when I was younger, and I didn't grow up with Freddy, and I'm seeing them now as an adult, I'm obviously not as afraid of them as I would be if I was a kid. And that's sort of the other thing with Freddy, too, right? Like, obviously I know that him becoming a dream demon is not necessarily something that could happen in the real world, but something about the Freddy movies to me seems more realistic than some of the other slashers of past. I think it's because of the backstory, He's a bad dude who killed kids and got off on a technicality. So the people of this, small town or whatever got together and murdered him. That is something feasible that I could see happening. But what is he doing now? Going after their kids. I don't know, something about the idea of Freddy I think is just so effective in like a terrifying kind of way. I don't know, there's something really interesting I think about Freddy as a villain. And I like that we get, a fair amount of backstory for Freddy. but it never feels like too much to me. Like, it's never like, if I can go off on a tangent here, one of my favorite sort of underrated horror movies, if you will, is Hell House. It's just a really great sort of found footage type horror movie, and I thought it was extremely well done. So recently the sequel was released, and I didn't hate the sequel as much as other people seem to have, but something I didn't like about the sequel is that I felt like it really over-explained the lore from the first one. Like, I feel like the first one, part of the scariness is that it sort of hinted at what had happened in the hotel before, but you kind of had to put the pieces of it together yourself, whereas in the second one they kind of go through the story with like a fine-tooth comb. And that can be okay sometimes, but I always feel like it's going to be overdone. Like, it's overkill, the explanations. And I like to know the basics of things, but I don't always feel like the audience needs to know everything about what is going on. And especially with a horror movie, like, we don't always need to know the perfect workings, ins and outs of a villain and why they do what they do, especially if there's a supernatural aspect to it. I don't know, I just think they did a really good job with Freddy in particular's storyline and his past. Fun fact for you, off topic a little bit, but do you know why they chose these colors for this sweater? Red and green in this shade, in these shades. Apparently, they did research, and it's something about these two colors together are the most difficult for the eye to, like, comprehend together, and that's why they picked them for Freddy. Neato, right? How I'm doing my glam eye makeup right now is actually the same way that I do it when I do my Pennywise costume, with this really big, dark, black, smoky eye with a little bit of red around the outside edges. Obviously, the skin is going to be way different. God, this sweater is warm. Stab myself in the eye with my mascara wand, but it doesn't really matter because all of my eye makeup is black, so. Okay, so I am probably going to put on lashes at the end of this video. But now, for the most part, my glam makeup is done. So I have to switch out all of my makeup that I have, because my table here is only so big, for my special effects makeup. So just give me a sec. I'll come back with probably a very silly headband on. Believe me when I say I know how silly I look wearing red panda ears in a Freddy Krueger costume with red and black smoky eye. Sometimes it really be like this. I'm just going to sit here and tear some cotton balls apart. So anyways, we're this far into this video, and I just wanted to wait until I was out of the glam makeup mode to actually start talking about the movie specifically. So the original Nightmare on Elm Street is obviously the classic because it was the first. Now, our main girl in that movie, Nancy, I gotta be honest with you, the first time I watched this movie, Nancy was, like, probably my least favorite character in the movie, and I didn't know that she was, like, the final girl. So I was kind of bummed when she was the final girl. Heather Langenkamp is obviously a great actress, and she gets better, as she goes on, but she's very young in this movie, and so her acting is just, like, not quite there, and I found Nancy to be just kind of, like, whiny and annoying, and I wasn't a super fan. But it's grown on me. Like, the more I watch this movie, and the more I watch through the series, I like her more and more. So just keep that in mind. I didn't like her originally, but I like her quite a bit now. And I know some people have their reservations about Johnny Depp these days, but, oh, come on, he's so adorable in this movie. He's so young. And he's got one of, I would say, the most, like, of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, he's got one of the most iconic deaths, I would say, in this movie, where he gets sucked into the bed and then there's that big, like, geyser of blood that comes out. Every time I mention the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie to someone, they usually go, oh my god, you know that scene where Johnny Depp dies? I mean, I think that scene is cool. I think Tina's death is a little bit cooler right at the beginning of the movie because it really shows you how Freddy can affect you in real life via your dreams, because we're watching her get thrown around the room by nothing, but we know it's Freddy in her head. I don't know. I think it's cool. To me, that first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and to most people, is a classic. Will never be beat. And that's why I think, I think it was a 2010 attempt to redo the series failed, because, like, you can't, they just tried to remake the movie, like, exactly the same way it already was. Like, you just can't do that. You can't mess with something so great like that. Oh, I hate putting liquid latex on my face. I told myself the one thing I wasn't going to do was get liquid latex on this sweater. What's the first thing I did? I just did it again, twice! Now, the second Nightmare movie, however, is fucking awful. I watched it, and I couldn't believe how terrible it was. And I was like, God, I hope this isn't like what the rest of the series is like. It's most definitely not. And I looked it up, and I think think I read that it was like the worst reviewed of all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And when you consider the rest of the franchise, it doesn't make sense, because in the second movie, it's as if Freddy's haunting the house, like Nancy's house. But in the rest of the franchise, what he's doing is haunting the kids of the people who killed him. So it's awful, and it doesn't make sense, and I hate it. So let's not even stay there any longer than we have to. Don't watch the second one. If you're going to skip any of them, skip the second one. I knew I should have worn a bad shirt. Yeah, I would say skip the second one, go straight into the third one. Because the third one is perhaps my favorite of the franchise. The third one is called Dream Warriors, and the third one essentially follows a group of kids at like an asylum, pretty much. I think it's supposed to be like a sleep retreat for kids who have issues when they're trying to sleep or whatever, but essentially it's like an asylum, and they're there because
his name is Freddy Krueger. He was a child murderer before he died. Your parents, my parents, they burned him alive, and now we're paying for their sins. You are the last of the Elm Street children.
Nancy's there in kind of like a counselor type role. She's got kind of like the hots for the doctor dude, and he kind of likes her. The most unfortunate thing about Dream Warriors, though, is that one's the one where, in my opinion, they turn Freddy from like someone who's actually terrifying, and they sort of like cheapen his image a little bit by having him talk more. That's always been one of my favorite things about, you know, other slashers of the same era, is that they don't talk. And I think the lack of communication makes them more terrifying. Whereas, once they started getting Freddy to talk, he was just absolutely full of these stupid one-liners.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
And it makes me sad, because I just really, really feel like it cheapens Freddy. Like, he could be so scary, but he's not, because they decided to have him say stupid things. So I took a mini break right there in an attempt to try to get some of the liquid latex I got on my sweater off, and it didn't totally work. Sad times. My brand new sweater. So after my favorite one, which is Dream Warriors, is number 4, which I believe is called Dream Master. And fun fact for you about Dream Master, it was the highest grossing slasher movie of the 80s. Did you know that? So that means more than any of the Friday the 13th, more than any of the other Nightmare on Elms. And I think it was, I know the original Halloween movie came out in 78, so that wouldn't count, but there had to have been a sequel or two here or there in the 80s, right? Dream Master starts out with all of our remaining Dream Warriors getting killed, which I don't love. That makes me sad. But it does introduce us to our favorite leading lady of the entire franchise. Her name is Alice. I love her. I think she kicks ass. I think she's tough, and I just like her. I just like her so much. And I'm glad that she's like the starring character of both this movie and the one right after it. I just really like her. She becomes like sort of, I don't know, she's supposed to be like the good version of Freddy, like the good dream keeper, you know? Don't mind this, by the way. I know that this is not going to look right for a while, but it's easier to cover dark than it is to cover light. So then when I put my actual foundation shade on top of this, it should help. It should help. And the coolest thing about Alice, I would say, is that, you know, the rest of them all kind of, like throughout the series, defeat Freddy in sort of conventional ways, like they blow him up or whatever. Alice is the only one who kind of defeats him in like a, I don't know, like a more philosophical way. She has him like, she holds up a mirror, and through that he's able to like see the true evil inside or whatever, and it lets all of the souls that he's kept trapped in his body go. And I just think that that's not only a cool concept, but more interesting, like a more interesting route than they could have gone. They could have just gone a cheesier route with it. I don't know, Dream Warriors is still my favorite, but I do really like this movie and the next one that have Alice in them. God, I'm using a lot of foundation today. But I really do think that the dark underneath, creating this sort of shadow and sort of added stuff to the texture, So after Dream Master, we get Dream Child, which again follows Alice, and essentially the movie starts with her and her boyfriend Dan, who we knew from the movie before, having sex. And she gets pregnant, and I guess the sort of idea is that Freddy has been waiting in the wings looking for, like, a way to come back, and so he decides to use Alice's baby. This clinic has, like, nothing to it. This is awful. So, like, even when Alice is wide awake, if the baby is dreaming, Freddy is able to use that dream to enter our world. I believe I touched on it in the third movie as well, but Dream Child is really the one that tries to shove in your face Freddy's backstory of his mom being a nun and she was raped by a whole bunch of the people at the sort of asylum where she worked. And so somehow Alice is able to use Amanda Krueger to sort of defeat Freddy in the end. I'm not gonna lie to you, Dream Child is not my favorite. I mean, I don't dislike it, but it's not my favorite. But I love the character of Alice enough that I will watch it when I'm doing like a rewatch, you know? Now the one after that is sort of the last one of the original run. It's called Freddy's Dead. And it sort of explores the idea of Freddy's daughter. So, obviously before he was killed, he had a wife and a daughter, and then he killed his wife, and she saw it, and then when they killed her, she was put into foster care and changed her name to Maggie, and now she's working as like a counselor in like a youth program type thing for wayward teens or whatever. And Freddy gets into the dreams of one of the teens, and the movie sort of leads you to believe for the most part that that teen is Freddy's kid. But then you find out, obviously, that it's not, and that it's the counselor. Her name is Maggie. And I like to think that this makeup look that I'm doing is an AU, where instead of killing Freddy, Maggie follows his same path. And Maggie's actually played, I did not know this, but Maggie is played by Lisa Zane, who is the sister of Billy Zane. And I just think she's gorgeous. That one, to me, Freddy's Dead, even though I think it's only like an hour and a half long, it felt the longest. It had like the most sort of plot stuff, I guess. And I guess I was just maybe the least interested in it, but it felt like it took me 4 hours to finish watching that movie. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it. I don't know if I was just disinterested or what was going on, but I felt like it took me 3 years to finish that one the first time I watched it. To the extent that I was like not looking forward to watching it a second time because I was like, damn, like I'm setting up for the Lord of the Rings trilogy here. The next Nightmare on Elm Street movie is, I believe it was the lowest grossing movie of the franchise. But I really liked it. Because it's not like they didn't try to add on to the series. They didn't try to reboot the series. They basically just tried to make a really, really meta movie with the actors from the original franchise, like Heather Langenkamp as Nancy. Well, she was Nancy originally, and Robert Englund. Like, tried to have them play themselves in the movie as if Freddy is coming back and is actually haunting actual Heather Langenkamp. I could see how that movie wouldn't be like a fan fave, but I liked it. I thought it was interesting, and I think I like Heather Langenkamp as herself better than as Nancy, to be honest. Kinda can't wait to just, like, douse this in blood. I know Freddy's not super bloody, but I really want to put blood all over it. Well, my friends, we're almost at the end of this video. I have added my lashes. Now I'm going to add a little bit of scab blood. I'm going to try not to go overboard, but I see that every time. And I always do. I really just want to add it into some of the recesses here, you know? No, you didn't think I was going to manage to get through this whole video and not talk about Freddy vs. Jason, did you? Let me just say this. There is a big difference to me between 80s cheese and early 2000s cheese. 80s cheese I can handle. I can grasp that it was probably scary at some point because, you know, that's what the technology was. And usually the movies, even if they suffer from 80s cheese, are usually pretty good. It's just you have to get through the 80s cheese. And it's not just like it's just the 80s movies that do that. There is, you know, 70s cheeses like that too. If you look at the original Halloween, not scary really by today's standards, but I can see how Halloween or The Exorcist would be terrifying for that time. The Exorcist is still kind of scary by some people's standards. That's how you make a great movie. But to me, early 2000s cheese is like... I just can't do it. Early 2000s cheese to me is like this really shitty, like MTV quality stuff where it looks like everything is an episode of some sort of Teen Beach show and everything is overacted and, in my opinion, overlit. They use just fill lights for everything. And I find a lot of movies from the early 2000s, while they might have a lot of nostalgia for some people, they're really terrible movies. And I think Freddy vs. Jason is one of those. In theory, bringing the two together, iconic, if you will, slasher characters together, seems like a great idea. I just don't think it worked with the sort of early 2000s feel. I feel like if they had done it earlier, early 90s, late 80s, when both of them were in their heyday, if you will, it might have gone a little bit better. But I just feel like the timing wasn't right. They could maybe even pull it off now. Especially if you brought back Robert Englund. I mean, how early 2000s can you get where there's even a stereotypical stoner character? I just hate it. It upsets me. I don't think it was well done. I think it could have been done a lot better. I don't want to go overboard with the blood, so I think that's it. Do I put on lipstick? I think I put on lipstick, right? I would just like to say once and for all, there is so much cat hair glued to my face currently. Actually, yeah, I think the lipstick was a good idea. I think it kind of adds some depth to the bottom half of my face, right? And now we need this. Freddy is not Freddy without his little hat. Even though I have a giant head, so this doesn't really fit me. And of course, the glove. Which is honestly too big for me, but that's okay, that's okay, that's okay. And this is my girl, Freddy Krueger look. Maggie, his daughter, she was bad. What can I say? I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed how I did my makeup. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on some of the movies in this franchise. Really, 3 and 4 are my favorites, with an honorable mention to the original one, of course. The second one is awful. Don't even watch it. That's the TLDR of this whole video. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and you subscribe to my channel if you have not subscribed already. And I will make sure I see you next time. Sweet dreams.